talk with every sip and laugh. Coffee's the fuel, martini's the craft. Conversation swirling in the cool night air. Talk the walk, we're going somewhere.
Woo! Good morning, Alan.
Good evening, Leanne. There you go.
Great to see you here. And thank you for joining us wherever you're joining us from. You might notice that Alan and I look a little bit different today. Is it us, Alan? Is it something else?
I don't know. I think we look fine, as a matter of fact.
We're using a new tool called Restream. So let us know where you're joining us from, and we'll get into today's topic. But first, it's always really important to have the check-in. So Alan, how has your week been?
Well, I've had first world problems. I decided that I would fix an outside faucet that goes to the pool and the flowers and everything. And I did. I fixed it very well. And thereafter, we only had hot water coming out of the taps, and we had leaks here and no water there. So the plumber's finished today. God knows what this is going to cost me. And among our cars, we have two Bentleys, and Maria drives both of them. One is a convertible, one's an SUV.
Nice.
And on 2 consecutive days, she got flats in both these cars. We had to call Bentley Roadside Assistance. They sent a truck. It went up to Massachusetts, and we're getting one back tonight and one tomorrow. Now, I know this is not exactly a normal problem for people, but you asked, Leanne.
I did ask. But how do you get flats on 2 consecutive days? Is there something on the road that, I don't know, the same stretch of road that, something's going on? Like, what's happening?
Between here and our rental house, which we rent out, and our church, is another city. It's an adjoining city, and they have a terrible Department of Public Works. There are huge potholes left from the winter. And on these high-end cars, the sidewalls are very vulnerable, and the tires. So she took a driveway too fast and hit the edge of the driveway with one, and with the other one, she hit, apparently, the pothole that ain't Cincinnati. So she went crazy. She went to the city, and to her surprise, the city was very nice and said, "We have a fund. We will give you money. We have a fund. These are the forms to fill out. Give us the bill." Well, fair enough, but their fund is $300.
Yeah.
It's a gesture.
It is a gesture. I just wonder, with that price tag of a Bentley, surely you think they'd have tires that didn't run flat. Like you think if the price of the car, where's that technology?
They run flat until you stop. That's the point of a tire like that.
Yeah.
And then the tire deflates, and then they find, the dealer says, you got a problem under this front grill here. So
I love that. Now, I guess that story is a good example of what we're going to talk about. But first of all, I'd love to welcome those that we've got here right now. We've got hello, Ola from Oria, Spain. Great to have you here. Aleandra's from Chile. Great to see you. Old colleague of mine. Lovely to see you. Yusuf's joining us from Dubai. So we've got 3 countries so far. We also have Australian represented by MK. Great to have you here. Plus Trinidad and Tobago.
I love
This
that.
is probably the most diverse group we've had. Actually,
yes. Now I'll point out to you that "Hola" means hello, right? That it's not.
Hello,
that's
yes,
not the name.
hello,
Okay.
yes.
And in Dubai, I stayed at a 6-star hotel. It's this just incredible, nutty, and I ate in the highest restaurant in the world and went in the tallest building. I mean, everything has EST at the end.
Yeah. Oh, I remember in Dubai, I went to buy just a slice of cake. And I was like, oh, that looks like a good one. And so I bought it. And 10 minutes later, she's still packaging this thing up. Like, I just wanted to get it on a plate and eat it. It was the most beautiful gift-wrapped cake. But geez, the opulence is actually incredible.
Well, they have Ferraris and Bentleys as police cars. That's the only way they can catch the speeders who are driving Ferraris and Bentleys.
Teslas could probably catch up. I know. I'm not going to start talking to you about Teslas. I know what you feel about those. Anyway, today's topic: getting paid to be yourself. Alan, is it possible? This is probably our most obnoxious topic. Is it possible to get paid to be yourself?
I don't think it's obnoxious, and that's what I've done for a living. And let me just say 1 or 2 things here to start off. The first is everybody talks about authenticity these days, and very few people practice it because they're not getting paid to be themselves. I mean, if you look at all these award shows, we just had the Tonys here, but the Oscars and the Grammys and so on, these people are being paid to be somebody else,
Yes.
And to be paid to be ourselves, what we have to do is to be comfortable with value that helps others. So, I have a model train set. I build models. I smoke cigars. I'm not going to get paid for that. These are hobbies. But I love to write and I love to speak and I'm really good at giving people advice and coaching, and I get paid big for that. Somebody said I had this big session in Miami, and I had sort of some of my star clients there with questions from the audience. I was the last one to be interviewed. And somebody says to me, I've just figured you out. I said, well, how about enlightening me? I'd love to know. And he said, you do what you love doing, you get paid for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that doesn't require a nuclear scientist. So I think it's a legitimate topic. I think that people are much more effective that way because there's no burden on them. In other words, they're doing something they love doing. And I think architects are this way, and journalists and nurses and so forth. But I'll tell you one thing. Those people, teachers and journalists and nurses and firefighters and so on, they're taken advantage of because they work for organizations that know they love the work and they don't pay them that much. All those people pay more. But you and I and the people listening, in all probability, we're our own boss. And so we demand the money we deserve.
Yeah. And I think this also appeals to, if you are working in an organization, like using that to find out what you do enjoy doing, what your strengths are as well. Just about your point around getting, you like smoking cigars. There's people out there that actually are doing like just, influencers, modern day influencers that are just getting paid to do stuff like that. I actually reckon you probably could get paid to smoke cigars somehow, or you'd figure out a way.
Yeah, but I wouldn't feel good making money smoking cigars. I mean, I don't really feel I'm helping other people. I feel, take a sommelier or take somebody in the wine business. They're helping somebody enjoy their meal. Okay. And I guess cigars could fit in. But I'm more into helping people with things I love doing in their lives that they can use tomorrow and the next day and the next day. I mean, how many cigars can you smoke?
But
right. Every day, you can be more successful in negotiations. You can be more successful influencing people. You can write better.
So let's talk about this possibility of getting paid to be yourself. And like you said, there's certain fields, nursing, education, if you work in the schooling system, where you are sometimes taken advantage of because you love it so much. What if you have a hobby or something that is a calling to you, but maybe the value isn't there? Is it possible to position it in a way that is valuable?
No.
It's not.
I'll tell you why.
Interesting.
Yeah, I've been coaching for 40 years or whatever it's been.
Yeah.
I won't admit to more than that, I guess. But I have met a lot of people who wanted to market and make money. And I realized in short order that they were trying to market a hobby. And it never works out because the whole aspect of marketing and creating demand and creating need. So they're passionate, but there's not enough need out there. I'll give you a very quick example that maybe people can use as a metric for themselves. There are 3 things you need to be successful in marketing and being yourself and making money. The first is there has to either be a market need or a need you can create. Okay. Yeah. A market need that exists or a need you create. Secondly, you have to be great at it. So it's beyond competence. You have to be excellent at it. And so thirdly, you have to be passionate. Now, if there's market need and you're great at it, but there's no passion, you got a 9-to-5 job. If there's market need and passion, but there's no competence on your part, no excellence, you're going to lose out to the competition. And if you're really good at it and you're passionate, but there's no market need, nobody hears your message. So those 3 things I've found absolutely required if you want to enjoy yourself and have people pay you.
Yeah. Those are really good points in terms of like that Venn diagram, in terms of what you need to sort of land in the middle. In terms of market need, what's easier? I would imagine it's easier just to go off an existing market need as opposed to creating a market need.
Well, that's a really good question because it is easier to respond to market need, but it's much more valuable to create need. And so when you respond to need, you're generally responding to what people really want. And that's a commodity in a lot of ways, But when you create need, so somebody says, hey, listen, we really want an executive leadership workshop because we're not on the same page here. And we want 3 days and, lunch. And I say to them, well, listen, but that's not what you need. What you need is a new strategy that you all contribute to.
Yeah.
And so, well, why do you say that? And I take them down a different road. And a lot of people, what I call stop too short. They don't look at the really greater need, which you can establish by asking, why do you want what you're talking about now? Why is it important? So you move from what people think they want to what they really, really need. And that's far more valuable.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, just asking that question. That's in terms of what it is, and then using your expertise to create maybe a new need. Yusuf, would love to welcome you back. Alan, Leanne, thank you so much to Dubai. Alejandra. Oh, great. So just lovely sort of shares in the comments. Cigar peg shout out.
Oh,
What does that mean?
that's the National Speakers Association, Cigar Peg. It's run by Ed Rigsby, and they've contributed hundreds of thousands of dollars to charity. It's a great organization.
Oh, fantastic. Great to have that shout out. Now, a lot of the time, Alan, I remember because you ran your consulting under Summit Consulting Group. If you were to start your consulting group in 2025, would you call it that, or would you just go under your name, Alan Weiss?
Well, listen, it's Summit Consulting Group is a legal entity, but that's not my brand. It's my subchapter S, which is the legal thing in the United States here. But my name is my brand. And it was pretty quickly that people moved from at Summit Consulting to get Alan Weiss. So, if I had to start over again, I'd ask an attorney what I need for a legal entity and we'll have them make sense for subchapter S and all that. But your name is the best brand you could possibly have. So, I've had brands like $1 Million Consulting and things like this. But instead of saying the 6 Figure to 7 workshop, you want to say Alan Weiss's 6 Figure to 7 workshop. And, that's an example. I love working with people who can immediately and dramatically raise their revenues, and we can see the result. When I did that in the corporate world, that's like moving a super tanker. But dealing with individuals, it's more of a speedboat.
It is, yeah, because obviously there's no rules really, and basically the biggest, well, your boss is yourself, so you can really sort of break it out of that. A lot of the time, you talk about marketing, and you say everything that you do is marketing. Like even going on your holidays is marketing. Talking about the flat tires in your Bentley is also, I guess, a bit of marketing. Is getting paid to
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I guess is getting paid to be yourself, is it the same as like monetizing, I guess, what you do and how you live?
Oh, look, I used to, my value proposition used to be I help individuals and organizations achieve dramatic performance, right? But now I deal with people like you. I deal with individuals, and I say I help people create a lifestyle beyond their aspirations. So I demonstrate the lifestyle. I'm not talking theoretically. I'm not a ski instructor in the chalet sipping brandy. I'm up there in the slopes with you, and you can see what I do. So yeah, I mean, there are some people who say, "Oh God, your lifestyle, you're arrogant. I don't want to hear about it." Well, fine. That's not the person I want as a client. I want a person like I had here today in my special program this morning who says, "How do I do that?"
I'm with you. So this is I really had this thing around, because sometimes when I put stuff out, I'm like, am I just being too self-indulgent? Is this? And so it's really interesting that you're saying it will definitely repel those people that think that way, but it will attract people that want more of what you've got.
That's right. So connect the dots. Okay. If you want to get paid big money for what you love doing, you don't worry about people liking you. You worry about people respecting you. Now, you put out a piece I just read this afternoon about how you can get an appointment with almost anybody, right?
Yeah.
And you gave specific examples, and you showed how it was done, and it happened to you. And so that's very pragmatic and realistic. And it was interesting. It wasn't like something on LinkedIn that's all theoretical.
Thank you.
Here are 12 things you do to meet buyers. I've never met a buyer, but here are things you could do. And the only thing, you only had one weakness in the whole article, and that's when you said Tom Brady had cosmetic surgery. I resent that.
Okay, that's hilarious because that was a late addition to the piece. Like I'd written it, then I woke up this morning and I'm like, how would I describe Cameron Smith to someone that's never heard him? Because like most of my, readers aren't from Australia. And I thought, oh, Tom Brady. But yeah, when I think Tom Brady, I think just Botox. So I'm glad that, thanks for reading it. And by the way, I put a link to if you want to sign up, I'll put a link up there, and I'll put a link to Alan's newsletter, his Monday morning memo in a second. And if you are joining us, let us know what you think of, are you Tom Brady or are you team Cameron Smith, if you've heard of him? This thing around authenticity, like, can it ever backfire? Like, Alan, are you really, like, if you're not like this all the time, I'm sure Maria would have a different perspective perhaps of what you're like, or are you like this all the time?
No, I'm like this all the time. I mean, Maria doesn't always like it, but I'm like, if you talk to her, she'd tell you I'm very consistent. I never look at a price tag. I never worry about what something costs.
Yeah.
She's always telling me, we don't need a bigger suite. This is good. I said, well, let me just check, and that's who I am. But here's the first part of your question. Here's the danger.
Yeah.
if you want to be perceived as authentic, you better be consistently authentic. So I've seen speakers on stages, with false hair and with 2 divorces and a drinking habit, and they're chain smokers, and they're telling me how to take personal power in my life. Give me a break. So I think that, in for a dime, in for a dollar. You can't walk in and out of the door and be 2 different people. So you have to be consistent. And if you're giving advice, and metrics here are important. If you're giving advice, let's say the customer is your most important asset. You can't have somebody say to you, "Hey, we got a customer on the line," and we say, "I'm not going to talk to the customer." I mean, that's cognitive dissonance.
Yes.
So this is called talk the walk, but the predecessor is walk the talk, right? And so you have to do both.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how authentic I can be sometimes as well. Like I'm very, I don't know if people know that I'm impatient. I imagine you're impatient. Oh, I think we're both pretty impatient. But even yesterday, I was trying to walk over a bridge and they'd shut it down because said this person out with a stop sign. But the thing was, other people were walking out over my direction and she just wouldn't let me cross over to where I needed to go. And so there was I was just like, this is ridiculous. And I think I got this public perception that basically happy-go-lucky, pretty nice, but sometimes it can be, when stuff like that happens, a bit of bureaucracy, I get really triggered, and probably wasn't the best show of my authenticity then. Anyway,
you might not see those people again, though, right? I mean,
no, and I wasn't rude, but it was just more like, I don't understand why. When things don't make sense from a logical perspective, it's just like when rules are made that don't make sense.
Success, not perfection.
Thank you.
We can't be perfect, and we're going to have lapses. I mean, God knows, saints have lapses. The Pope will admit he's had lapses. Pick your religious leader. But the fact is that it's how we are most of the time, and we have to be true to what we're espousing in this business. So the advice we give, the coaching we give, all that, we've got to be consistent with that. And we can't tell somebody to do something that we don't do ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, sometimes I hear, back on this whole, we are the brand. So Alan Weiss is the brand, Leanne Hughes is the brand. Sometimes I hear pushback from people, from fellow consultants, solopreneurs who want to start their business and they go under a business name and run everything under the business name. Sometimes the pushback, I've heard this before. They say, I'm not interesting enough to get paid just to be me or to go under that brand. What would you say to that, Alan?
Do I have a drink? I do.
You do have a drink.
Look, I mean, that's an esteem issue. I mean, if you don't think, the first sales to yourself, if you don't think you're good enough, nobody else is going to think you're good enough. You can't fake that.
Yeah.
And so you can't hem and haw. You can't say, well, let me talk. I've got to research this. I made my way early in my career after I got fired by just telling every buyer I met with, of course. Can you do this? Of course. And I either knew how to do it, or I learned how to do it, or I faked it.
Yeah.
Of course. And I only had 2 restrictions, technology and finance. I hate both of them. And so I wouldn't go near that because I had to be fair to the client. But within those 2 walls, I'll do anything. So I think if somebody is saying, I'm just not that interesting, I mean, that's a therapeutic problem.
Ooh, mic drop. Let's talk about this response, the of course response. You're saying, yeah, of course I can do it. Of course I can do it. I mean, just so quick side, then we'll go back to that question. But so an hour prior to this live stream, our typical streaming tool, StreamYard, was not available. Google Cloud has gone down. It's impacted the software. So I'm thinking, all right, what do I do? What do I say to Alan? Do I give him options? And I thought, no, Alan won't want options. Let's just sort this out, try another way and make sure it happens. So I guess that was my version of course, I'll figure it out before we get onto this. There's a bit of resourcefulness involved in that. So let's talk about you saying, of course, to any buyer outside of tech and finance. Really, what were you feeling? Were you like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? Or were you like, okay, no, not even for half a second. Were you like, how will this work?
No, once I said, of course, I said, okay. And then I had a little bit of free time there, right? I mean, it wasn't immediate. It might've been a week or a month later. At one point, I made millions of dollars at Merck. I worked with them for 12 years. And at one point they come to me. I was their first choice, I was their first choice because they said to me, look, we got a big project here. We want you to do it, but are you certified in CRI, which was Criterion Reference Instruction in the late 90s? So big deal. I said, no, I couldn't lie about that. They said, well, can you get certified so we can use you? We can get you in here. I said, of course. So I find out that a guy named Bob Mager is the father of Criterion Reference Instruction. He's out in Arizona. So I called him. I said, listen, I need certification. He said, I have a course. I said, great. What does it take? He says, well, it's $2,500 and it takes 17 days. I said, I have $2,500. I have 17 days. He said, what do you got? I said, I have a weekend. He said, okay, get in the plane, come out here. And in 2 days, Bob Mager, bless his heart, taught me CRI and how to make and drink a perfect Manhattan. Now, the latter I've used much more than the former, but once I got back with that, I said to Merck, here's my certification. They said, oh, thank God, now we don't have to worry about it. And I went around the world doing this. I mean, there were multiple projects with this stuff. So, at another point, I made industrial movies. They needed movies for their field force to learn how to sell and to learn how to market drugs. This is when they visited doctors. And they said, I said, I can do that, sure. So they said, well, tell us what it will cost. So I found a local firm here that did videos back then, and they had actors equity, the whole business. And I outlined what I needed. I said, hey, what's this going to cost? I said, well, that's 3 hours of filming, $7,500. I said, fine. I went back to Merck. I said, it's all set up. I can do it. They said, how much? I said, $25,000. I said, well, fine. Okay. Now, if I went to someone else and said, help me make these videos, right? Suddenly I've got a partner. Suddenly I'm spending money. I'm not making as much. See, the reason you're successful when you switch to this, I told you, we're very resilient doing this.
Thank you.
Is that I trust you. We're partners.
Yes.
I trust you. And when a client trusts you and you say, I can do it, that's the end of the story, unless you betray the trust. And so the self-esteem issue is, don't worry, I'll figure out how to do it.
An article I wrote the other week was around how I was working on this program, and someone that didn't know me, she was part of the experience, and she just kept asking me questions about, and this is another example of me being a bit irritable. I just said, it's not a big deal. Like I just said, it's not a big deal. And she kind of was a bit taken aback by that. So I mean, I've got to reflect on that as well in terms of my approach. But I think we've also got to trust ourselves. Like, so I it's great that you trust me, but I trusted myself that we'll make this work no matter what happens. Is that self-efficacy? Is that what you're talking about in terms of the competence, that second part of your Venn diagram around the expertise and just because for you to say, of course, you have high trust in yourself that you'll make it happen.
Yeah. And you also have to understand it's success, not perfection. So I can think of offhand 4 or 5 instances where I failed. And I said I could do something and I didn't.
Okay.
But I have 16,000 instances of where I did it. Now that's a good record, right? So it's not perfection. I learned from the failures, but man, I learned more from the successes. And the whole thing about what you and I do and the people listening and watching this, I'm a reductionist, as I've said before. You prepare well, you show up, you do your best, and you go home. And that's what this job's about. And so it's respect, not love. Get a dog and keep the pressure off yourself. But if you cannot, I mean, this is like Alcoholics Anonymous. If you can't trust yourself, you need help. You need a sponsor. You need a 12-step program, because you're never going to make it in life if you do not trust yourself. You know why? Because it seeps out. It's manifest. You can't hide that.
No, and it's not even something that if you meet someone that is unsure of themselves, maybe it's not that obvious, but there's something that comes through that you just sense, this doesn't feel right. So this topic, how to get paid to be yourself, it came out of I was just mapping out like a business model of like, what would my ideal business model look like? And, maybe the journey I've come from. So it was like a pyramid. Down the bottom was getting paid to use your hands and feet. The middle rung was getting paid to use your brain and your mouth. And I thought that's where I want to be. But then I thought, what would be on top of that? It's like just getting paid to be yourself. Which for me actually is probably just the second tier anyway, just getting paid to use my brain and to speak. What do you think of that model?
Well, I think that one of the secrets to achieving that is not taking yourself too seriously.
Yeah.
People huff and puff and they want initials after their names, like ants following them to a picnic. They want to be awarded. They want to be saying, listen, don't take yourself so seriously. Nothing you or I or anybody watching this does is going to change the nature of the universe. And so just try to make small changes, help people, help organizations, and laugh at yourself. You have to laugh at yourself, you know? So I can get away with my lifestyle because I come from poverty and I appreciate what I've got.
Yeah.
And that's why I talk about it. But I can laugh at my own excesses. Like I said to you, I've got first world problems.
Just on that, I love that we kicked this off with your first world Bentley problem. I've got a question here. I'm going to read it because it's it's quite long. So I'll just hide that there, and here we go. Okay. I'm in the marketing space in New Zealand over the last 12 years, working with hundreds of small businesses in most sectors. And by my estimation, about 40% of them have a marketing strategy, and only 10% of those will work. They have a business plan, health and safety plan, financial plan, but they don't have a marketing plan. Why do you think so many businesses don't spend the time or money to build a marketing strategy and just consistently waste time and money trying anything they think might work? What's the psychological problem going on here? Thanks, Todd.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. I've actually been asked this a lot of times. It's some version of it.
Yeah.
The issue here is that, first of all, in terms of competence, schools don't teach marketing. MBA programs barely teach marketing. And professionals in their career study on their content, whether it's design or architecture or law or whatever, they're not taught marketing. Healthcare, not taught marketing. So that's one problem. The second problem is that they are reluctant to use people who are experts. And what kills me is you wouldn't use a doctor. You wouldn't want an operation on your body by somebody who's not a surgeon. I mean, not only would you demand a doctor, but you demand a specialist who's a surgeon operating your body. Why would you try to put together a marketing plan in an ever-changing world, in a tumultuous world, and not bring in a marketing expert? That's the problem. And so the psychology is the belief that I've never gained the skills to do this. Remember, there's need, there's skills, and there's passion. I've never developed the skills. I have very little passion, and there is a need, but they don't have the other two. So, I would never try to do my own taxes. I hire people. And I don't expect people to try to create their own strategies as that strategist. You ought to hire me. And that's the way of the world. And as part of it is confidence. And that is people who see coaches and help as valuable and it shows that they're strong are winners. People who see coaching and help and try to hide it because they see it's a threat, they're the losers.
Yeah, it's interesting. Even when I had my first coach, when I left my business and I was talking about the work I was doing with her, people are like, oh my gosh, you're sharing about your coach. And it's like, why wouldn't I? And then, obviously having you as a coach, of course I'm going to brag about that. I don't think it's a weakness at all. It's an absolute sign of strength to get in the experts to help you out.
Yeah, that's right.
I also think, Todd, there's a bit of an identity thing here. Like, I guess, Alan, our first conversation, you said to me, we're not in the business of consulting. We're all in the business of marketing. And the second you have that identity and mindset shift and you're like, I'm in the marketing business, of course, you're going to have a plan. All right. So we're going to wrap up really soon. So if you have any last questions, let us know in chat. It's been wonderful having just, I guess, over 8 countries represented today. We talked about the payoff of building a business around your identity. Are there any risks of doing that?
Well, there's a risk in that if you, like I said, we all make mistakes, but if you do something really stupid, you cheat a client.
Yeah.
You guarantee something that is just a disaster because unlike what I've said, you couldn't make it happen. It's associated with your name now, and that will spread. I talk about your public square, and ideally in your public square are your ideal buyers. So it's not the whole world, it's your ideal buyers, and word will spread. Just like, I was successful because of all the evangelical referrals I got from clients. Those turn into negative comments if you don't produce for someone. That's
right. Yeah. And it's unfortunate. You could be amazing 99% of the time, but that 1% that you do fail or it's done in a dramatic fashion can really destroy your brand. Okay. Very timely. So thank you both. Leave you with a favorite quote of my own. Oh, I can't see that. So if you can post it, that would be great. Todd says, great answers. Thanks, guys. All the best, Todd, over in New Zealand with, I guess, making certain that marketing is at the forefront. Alan, we haven't booked our next date and I'm sure we will, but it's so great to see you all here. Any sort of final messages about getting paid to be yourself that you'd like to share with listeners today?
Yeah, it's a kind of ironic one. We're talking about being yourself. You have to be fearless. You have to be fearless being yourself and stop acting and stop pretending to be somebody else and stop walking on eggshells. Tell people they're wrong if you have to. Tell people there's a better way if it makes sense. But stop worrying about being loved and be fearless, because those are the kinds of people that strong people want to hire.
Yeah, love it. Being fearless. We do have the quote that came through. It's not arrogance if I am actually better than you.
Woody Allen said, a narcissist is someone better looking than you are.
That is so good. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for joining us on the stream, and we'll see you for Talk the Walk next time. Cheers to you, Alan.
Thank you so much.